Good morning and welcome to this morning's Fife Property Show, episode 110. Who would have thought of that?
I know.
Oh my God, that's 2 years we've been doing this consistently every single week, Richard. That's unbelievable.
I know, it is quite unbelievable. We done obviously it was a few weeks back now, and I thought, God, we're at 100 episodes, and now we're 110, so...
But just the fact that it's 2 years. 2 years since
I know,
we've
it's
been
fluent.
doing it.
It's totally fluent.
And yet, geez, we must produce some amount of content. Anyway, the great thing is every single week, something's been different every single week. So there's always some experience and expertise to draw on from some of the guests that we've had on as well. And obviously yourself and myself. And then we've got Perry and we've got Jimmy and we've got Karen. And we've got all these different people in the property management. We've got Charlotte as well. We've got all these people that actually are in these blogs and vlogs where they're giving their personal experience and their personal training on it. So if you're out there, remember, we have a playlist of all these helpful guides. All these episodes are put on YouTube on our playlist for helpful guides. There's I think there's over 170 of them or something like that.
Yeah, that's
maybe more. I don't know anything. Anyway, this is the rental red flags this morning. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, it's how to avoid problem tenancies and create the perfect letting in Fife. Really, to be honest, it could be the whole of the UK, it could be the world, but we obviously focus on Fife because we are Fife Properties.
Yeah, it does apply to everyone.
No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, we will refer to obviously Fife, but it does apply to right across the country. Any lettings procedure. This is quite a good one actually. I've obviously read through what we're going to discuss today, and it's all relevant.
I've got to say nothing's more important than getting it right. The right tenants for your rental property, especially right now, what's happening, because the choice you will make will have a profound impact on the peace of mind and finances.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want a tenant? It'll look after the property. It'll not be antisocial. It'll pay their rent on time. It'll, and equally, who doesn't want a landlord which will not skimp on repairs and actually do what's necessary and look after the tenant and have that responsibility of a care of duty in the property while they're in there. Whenever we're contacted by a landlord who's been having problems with their property, there's very often something that was missed or skipped in the tenancy before it started. Every single time, isn't it? Yeah. It's just do you think it's a miscommunication?
I don't know. We get it time and time again. If it's people that come to us and say, look, I've got this problem tenant, and when we go back over how they've executed things in the beginning, it's not been done correctly. It's so important to do things properly at the beginning in order to find the right tenant. A lot of people think, oh, the perfect tenant, it's so hard to find the perfect tenant. We've got loads of them. And it's all about doing that properly at the beginning before the tenancy even begins. And there's so much involved in that, and we'll cover it all today.
I think it's, for me personally, I think it's just general assumptions are being made at the beginning. And everybody thinks that they've when they say certain things, that their belief on what that means is entirely different to someone else's belief. But it goes unsaid. So therefore, everybody goes away. The two parties go away with different expectations about what's about to happen and what should happen next. Well, you know yourself. I mean, my standards are way up here somewhere. Everybody else is about here, and they're quite happy with that. But I'm like, how is it not like this?
A big pitfall is assumptions, and just assuming, that a tenant's going to know this, or a tenant's going to know this, and likewise as well, the tenant might assume that the landlord's going to do this, or do you know what I mean? So make sure you set out a clear agenda of how things are going to play out leading up to the tenancy, and then moving forward for there as well.
Yeah. It's also down to dare I say, is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So for landlords especially, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't. Some landlords, well, I'll be honest, quite a lot of landlords out there don't know the full ramifications about what they should be doing. Now I can see that all the time because you've got the Scottish Property Network, you've got the Scottish Property Podcast, you've got the Scottish Property Investment Network, you've got the Property Investment Network, and you go into all these forums and you see loads and loads of landlords on there asking typical questions, which I think you should know that already.
Yeah.
It's like, or you should know the answer to that already because you have tenants in situ. And that's a question that should always, should have been answered at the very, very beginning, or if not, you should have known by your own training as a landlord. And so often it gives me concern. While it's not a legal breach, it's just like you should know this as a landlord.
Yeah, I
And you
think
can
as well. There's
I'm often one for going on. Just to, I'll catch up with you in a minute, Richard. I'm often one going on and saying, "Why would you not know this already?" and calling people out on it, and they get really rubbed up the wrong way. And I thought, but you should know this already because you are a landlord. You're responsible, and you should know this for that very reason. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that there's a lot of landlords who maybe struggle or aren't really up to speed with new legislation and things like that. And people come to us and think, look, I'm not, and they could be forgiven for that because obviously legislation does change quite a lot. But what you're
Yeah.
referring to is some landlords who have been operating for a while, the very basics are like, they don't know it or they don't do it or don't know that they need to do it. It's quite scary sometimes.
Such simple things. It's like the EPC should be kept in the property at all times.
Yeah.
And it's a legal requirement to do that. And Legionella testing, is Legionella testing mandatory? Well, it's not. It's not mandatory. Legionella testing is not mandatory. It's actually, you've got to do it, but as a risk analysis, so you've got to then assess how often you should be doing that based on the risk involved. And as long as you're doing that, that's fine. And it's not under any Housing Act. It's under the Care Homes Act. Legionella testing that was brought in. And that's where we were brought into it, because we were dragged into that through some piece of legislation that then said in the Care Homes Act that landlords were responsible for this. But the other things are as well is just simple things. It's like, I've walked into some people's properties. Hey, didn't get me wrong, the council included. I've walked into their properties and actually looked at the smoke and fire detectors and thought to myself, you're not even legally compliant. And it's like, you've never even actually put up the right smoke detectors, or you've never upgraded from the old legislation, which was one in the hall, upstairs and downstairs, and that was all you needed. But now it's actually one in every reception room, smoke detector, and in the hall upstairs and downstairs, and then a heat detector in the kitchen, and they all must be interlinked. And one of them, I think one of them must be hardwired, or is it just all interlinked now? Have they changed it?
No, you're fine now. As long as they're all interlinked with long life lithium batteries, you're fine.
Yeah, sealed lithium batteries. It's a 10-year thing, yeah?
Yeah.
And you can buy these parts online. It's really the residential people, homeowners, have actually been brought into that, up to that same standard as well now, in terms of the legislation. So all the homeowners are doing what we've done for the past maybe 10 years or something like that.
We're about 7 years, I think. Since
Yeah. Okay. So it's a typical story. When you think about it, is that things start well, everybody gets along when a tenancy starts. The landlord was pleased with their choice of new tenants. Then at some point, something went wrong, and the landlord is left frustrated, delusioned, and out of pocket. This is a it's a communication issue every single time. You know the amount of times I've had to actually, when I was with the landlord association, when I was running that for Fife, I said, geez, the amount of times I used to say to people, my God, when they said, I just want to get rid of my tenant, and I'm like, and why would you want to get rid of your tenant? Because they were horrible to me on the phone, and I'm like, what? Are you stupid or something? It's like it's not an emotional thing. My God, what were they going on about? Oh, because I hadn't done this or done that. And I went, well, why did you not do it? I would be saying the same thing. It's like, but it's the way they said it. It's like, that is not the way. You should not be a landlord if that's the case.
No, you really need, there's certain ways to mediate with a tenant and build relationships and things, and that's not how we do it.
Yeah, and then there's also ways to get a tenant back on track, and equally get a landlord back on track as well. And it's having that skill and having an agent that has that skill. It pays huge dividends, doesn't it? It pays huge dividends in terms of occupancy rate, yield.
Yeah.
Because people will pay more for a better service. We know that, because if that's not the case, then why would somebody not? Why does somebody go to an expensive restaurant, and why does somebody go to a less expensive restaurant? Because they pay for the service. Why do people join the BA Executive Club? Because they get first on the plane. They're paying a wee advancement to get that service. So people will pay a wee bit extra for a service, and there's nothing wrong with that. They have the choice to do that or not do that. It's a free market.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you tell if you'll get respectful, responsible, and reliable tenants beforehand before you hand over the actual keys? More than anything, Well, it's about the setup, isn't it? And this is what we're going to talk about. You know,
Yeah.
it's a long lead in to talk about this, but the reality is, it really is down to the setup. And you know, Richard, you're going to take us through this anyway about our tried and tested processes to avoid problem tenancies and create stable and long-term lettings. So, you know, what is the first sort of thing we should be doing?
I think firstly, it's obviously the very initial stages. It's about
Yeah.
and how to run compatibility checks on potential tenants. The first step to creating your perfect letting is to obviously minimise wasted viewings by checking your property and whoever is inquiring about it, and make sure that they're a right fit. Now
What does
we
that
do like.
mean then? You know, when we talk about compatibility, you know, what do you mean by that?
Well, we do a lot of pre-qualified. We've always pre-qualified, but the
Yeah.
pre-qualifying stage lately it's changed a lot over the last few years, just due to the way things are in terms of obviously lockdown and coming to COVID, and obviously restrictions for viewings, and we've adapted that so much, and there's a lot of different aspects to that. But I mean, initially compatibility. Well, firstly, you need to look at what in terms of what the person is actually looking for in terms of the space, how many rooms they need, do they need a
Ah,
garden,
right, okay.
location,
Mhm.
I mean, do they need parking, do they need access to transport? Do you mean these initial things are all the questions that we ask before somebody goes to even view a property? Because
Yeah.
what's the point in you viewing a property if you get there and be like, oh, there's nowhere near the bus stop. I need to get to work. I've not got nowhere to park my car. I don't have enough space in the main living room for the kids. I don't
Yeah.
have enough bedrooms. Do you know, just simple things like that. Compatibility at what they are actually looking for.
It is a
Um,
big timetable, isn't it?
yeah,
Because you know, and you know, this is obviously borne out over the years about my personal experience about what I used to do. I mean, I used to just, you know, it's like as soon as somebody says I want a viewing, I just used to take them round, and then
that's the way it used to be done, though.
then I realised that it's like then they said, well, I don't really like it because I didn't need that and I didn't need this and I didn't need that, and I think, oh right, okay, well I've
I
asked you
should have
that,
asked all those
and
questions though.
eventually, you know, eventually this is how this has come about, and this is how we do it this way now, is because eventually I worked out it's like I'm wasting my time. And I'm wasting
Yeah.
other people's time, more importantly, as well. Taking them round for a property isn't actually what we call compatible for them.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it makes no sense to take you around. So if you want a garage, then this doesn't have a garage, and the landlord's not going to put up a garage. So you know, there's no point in going around to see the property if that's the case, unless you're wanting to put a garage up. And so that's the sort of things we're talking about. What other things? What other things would come into play then?
Do you know, as we talk about this, Jim, it's like people listening may think, God, they're simple questions. Why wouldn't you ask them? You'd be so surprised how many times they don't get asked. But as
Well,
we talk about
you know
maybe
what they say
room,
about common sense. There's no that
yeah,
comment.
I know, I know. But as we talk about rooms and obviously space and things as well, you need to know who your target audience is. Whether the property is for a family, whether it's for maybe a working professional couple, maybe it's ideally suited to a single person, or even people that are sharing or whatever. There's all these different types of tenants, and you should know what your the initial target tenant is for the target audience is for a property,
Yeah.
and be sure that the property fits that bill. Um, and that's
So
an
this is
important thing
this
to
is
do.
this is why I buy certain types of properties, because it can be multifunctional. So
Yeah,
the typical three-bedroom flats, which the ex-local authority are fantastic for that because they're three double bedrooms, they've got a big massive lounge. It could possibly potentially incorporate a dining table as well, and then the kitchen is off the back. So typically ideal for this for flexibility and the fact that you can have a couple in there and they're
that are
still
going to start a
affordable.
family. Yeah,
Yep, you can have a single person in there and it's still affordable. You can have a family in there and it's more than affordable for them and it's easy and adaptable for them. And then you also can have sharers. Now, I'm not
yeah.
a big fan of sharers. You know, I've
No, I
tried this
know. But
loads and loads of times. Often, you know, people just don't get on, regardless of the fact that they love each other in the beginning. I'm not talking about couples, by the way. I'm just talking about their best friends moving in with each
friends
other.
and things.
They
Yeah,
have fantastic time together and all the rest of it, and then you know they don't realize once they've moved in together they can't live with each other under each other's feet.
yeah.
And so for me personally, I don't do sharers for that very reason, because it doesn't fit with the logic, and it also has a high turnover in terms of the number of tenants. One moves out and then it's difficult to get someone else to move in and share with someone they don't know.
Yeah.
It's, you know, again, that's the reason why I'm not a big fan, for me personally, of student lets. That's not my thing. I'm mainstream renting to a person, and I want long-term tenants that I can do a good job for, look after, and actually have a really good high occupancy rate, because that then keeps the rent flowing in order for me to be able to do any repairs and improvements on the way as we go. And I mean, and upgrades as well. That's a big thing for me. Anything else?
Yeah, I think just to touch on what you said there about obviously these three, we've spoken about this in previous shows, these 3-bedroom flats that are really, they fit the bill for quite a lot of different demographic, but obviously they're quite good for even like couples to grow into as a family, or even take a family as it is. But I think it's always important to establish how many children are going to be in a group. Do you know what I mean? How many children are coming, or is there any plans for children to be coming along? Because if you have maybe you've got a couple and they've already got 2 kids, and you think, well, that's fine. Do you know what I mean? Typical 2 adults, 2 kids family, but in their heads they're thinking, but we're going to have more, and maybe there's not room for that. So do you know what I mean? Having that conversation to see where they plan their family and things to grow into. So are they going to have space to grow into? Are they planning to expand in the next year or two? And then that's something to look at as well. And also the big thing is pets. Pets is quite a big thing at the moment. Obviously there's going to be some changes with that, but I'll not go into that. Obviously it's different. But we did do the show a couple of weeks ago, Jim. It was called Parents in Pause. So if you guys look at that, that's quite a good one about pets and things and children.
And the link's on the post. You click on the link, and then you'll get that link from this.
And you'll be able to go through to the
article written here. Interestingly enough, I'll go back to the things about couples and sharers and all the rest of it, and fits the bills. It's probably important to realise as well that personally for me, I don't really want to be a long-term landlord. I do short-term lets if that's the case. You know, I'm talking about a couple of years, but unfortunately, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to be very political about this, and the fact that because of the government's failure in their housing policy over the years, the Scottish government as well. We've got no choice but to house tenants for a long, long time. And I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's right. But they need to build affordable housing. They need to build social housing as well. And it has to be affordable. Now, we had this discussion before, and I had this discussion with certain political parties and people in these parties. And they said, well, there's some areas we can't afford to build the house. Because the cost of building the house is more than the house is worth. And I'm saying you can't afford not to build a house, because long term it pays huge dividends for the people living in there with tenure, security of tenure, because it's owned by the council, and therefore they could, they know they're okay. I mean, to be honest, they're okay with staying with me as well. But I'm, we would like to say this because obviously it's a government body then it's running the housing scheme. Therefore, they have to be more social. They have to abide by more rules. And while I think I'm social, and I probably will, it doesn't mean to say that every other landlord could be social, although the majority of private landlords are. Very, very rarely do you get rogue landlords. And according to the government statistics, it's 0.001%.
That's 0.001, yeah.
Is it no 10,000 landlords in the whole of the UK out of 2 million is the problematic landlords? Yeah, sledgehammer to Kirk and up with the legislation, isn't it? Anyway, let's move on. So what else are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think, and then obviously people's working situation and where they work and who they work for. Now, some employers can be notoriously or have notoriously high turnovers of staff, where others might have a good reputation, but we see it quite a lot. Agency workers or seasonal workers that have got short-term contracts or maybe don't even have a contract and are just obviously, like I say, on a rolling kind of 0 hours contract. Now, watch out for that, because you could move somebody in and they're maybe working, have a reasonably good wage, but they've not told you that they're not on a fixed contract, or they're only working till the end of the summer. And
they're only on a trial for 3 months.
Yeah.
And after 3 months, you could get paid off, and then their circumstances dictates, because they're under 35 and they're on their own.
They don't get enough benefit to cover their rent.
They'll only get a single room rent if that's the case. They'll not get enough benefit in order to cover the rental what it was in the first place. That's a really good tip, Richard.
And that's something that I've seen happen to people in the past, and landlords that have come to me that are having issues. And when I look back, I'm like, okay, right, so they were employed when they started with you, but it turns out that they only had such a lengthy contract, or they were working with an agency. And I'm like, did you not ask that question? Because then you wouldn't be in that situation. So again, it's asking all the right questions and doing the proper due diligence at the beginning.
Now, this comes back to saying that, I mean, a lot of people, I remember when I first said this to some landlords in the very beginning, when I first started, I says, you need to do sort of things like this. And I said, you might feel uncomfortable asking so many questions or pushing further if the answer is actually vague. But we speak from the experience when I say it removes unnecessary appointments. In fact, the best tenants love having their time and property search taken so seriously.
Definitely.
And also the fact is, like, you're effectively, and somebody said to me, I have a right to stay in your property. And I went, well, okay, you're only paying me a deposit of £500 and I'm giving you a property worth £70,000. Who do you think the right sticks with? It's me. I'm giving you something for it's worth £70,000, and all you're giving me is £500 deposit. I says I'll be deciding who's what sort of referencing I do and making sure it's done. Equally and within the law and all the rest of it. No discriminatory policies or practices. I've never ever put no DSS in an advert ever in my life since I've started, and that's 30 years I've been doing this. I've always said they're welcome. Because a lot of them actually, a lot of people on benefits actually think straight away they're excluded just by default, and that's why I usually say, and most of my adverts I used to say, well, DSS welcome, just to say that. Well, you kind of say to yourself, Richard. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from. It matters who you are and how you live. That's it. It's not your circumstances that dictate
Just got to say,
what you
your
do.
personal circumstances shouldn't reflect the person that you are and how you conduct yourself.
Yeah. Anyway, but so that's the one. So, what could we talk about as well? What's your thoughts on the people that are like, I'll just talk to you over the phone? Because I've seen that happen before, where nobody's actually done, face-to-face viewings or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, is this a thing? Should you
as a thing. Do you know, it's become so much more common because of the high volume of interest and obviously the lack of property and things just now. People are on the phone like, I'll just take it. And it's like,
do you think lockdowns taught them to be lazy?
Well, probably in a certain aspect, but people are so desperate to get property ahead of everybody else because there's this obviously need to obviously get property quicker because things are moving so fast. People think that they could phone up and say, like, I'll just take it, I'm in a good position, but it's like, well, we need to do what we need to do first.
I have no idea who you are.
Yeah, and what we always insist is that you view the property in person, or we at least we meet you in person. Now, there's a lot of obviously factors that come into that. Obviously, like we've got like I think a lot of things that might, but I always insist on face to face. It has to be the best thing to do. Never rent a property to somebody that you haven't met, and that would be because I think that although you could do all the referencing and the financial aspect and on paper, then it might be fine. You could meet somebody and that could all change.
Okay. You want to elaborate this on a bit on this?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of anyone's urgent time scale, and even if they're moving from abroad, like I say, a face-to-face viewing is a priceless insight into someone's character and whether they actually like the property as well. Do you know what I mean? They could look at the property in any videos we do. They might get there and think this is not for me. Video viewings are quite good, and they are a useful first step for someone who can't be there in person. But don't take your property off the market until you've actually personally shown someone around and met them.
Personal experience, I'm not going to say too much about this, but I tell you what, some people sound brilliant on the phone, and when they turn up, they look like a dog's dinner, and they're stinking of booze.
Yeah.
And they're stinking of booze. And it's like, my God, over the years, the amount of people that have actually done that, or they look high as a kite. And I'm not talking about just people from a different background and all the rest of it. I'm talking about anybody. This could be anybody in general. And it's like, my God, because remember, drugs and alcohol do not discriminate. And these are sort of things. So people have actually turned up like that. And it's like, that's a great point, Richard, about insisting on face-to-face viewings.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as the abroad thing's sometimes difficult. I had an American couple recently who were coming over to rent, and it was quite a high value property. And obviously, so I thought, do you know what I mean? But they couldn't be here until basically the day they were going to move in. So what we did do, and we do it sometimes, is insist that they get someone on their behalf, come to the property and meet us. We get them on the video call. We speak to the person who's representing them on their behalf. Obviously, look at their character in terms of, and if they'll vouch for the person, then obviously we've got them on the camera as well. But prior to the day of move-in and things, we still meet them. But it's a way of doing that because obviously if they're, like I say, if they're on the other side of the world, it's quite hard to do that. But still, the days leading up to the tenancy beginning, they will obviously need to arrive in the country, and we do still meet them. But it's a good way to set everything up. And I mean, if you get really big red flags when you first meet them, the paperwork's not signed yet, so there's always a get.
What things can you look out for on viewings?
I think look at how respectful a person can be. I mean, things like something I do every time I go to someone's house is when I get to the door. Am I okay with my shoes on? Would you like me to take my shoes off, or do you want me to put shoe covers on? Just being kind of obviously mindful of when they're in the property. Can I look in here? Do you know what I mean? And ask, and just their mannerisms and their courteousness and things as well is a really good reflection of how a person is in general, and obviously throughout the rest of the other aspects of their life. So I think, I mean, we've done this for years, Jim, and I know there's a lot of things when I meet somebody and I just think no or yes or no or yes. Do you know what I mean? And it's basically, it's like an interview, and it is.
Effectively, as an interview, it's your second biggest tax-free asset you're actually giving people the use of. Remember, another one as well, I was kind of smiling to myself, and it was just recollecting stuff. Family viewers, do they let their children run riot, you know, or do they manage them well? And I've got to be honest, I know it's quite, I didn't think it is discriminatory, to be honest, but do they let the children run riot? And are they actually going to destroy this house from top to bottom? I've walked into some people's houses and the children have been allowed to write on the wall and stuff, you know, and tear the wallpaper off and just do anything they want in the object of they're just free spirits. And it's like, what?
No, and I think especially as well. We had one actually, and Karen had done a viewing, and it was a 3-bedroom upper 4 in a block, and it was the upper apartment, it was the upper flat, and the kids ran amok, and I'm like, we can't go ahead with that.
The downstairs will be going mental.
The downstairs would just that's for the get go. There's issues there. So that's probably one of the real reasons why. And as well as, you know, probably a top tip for anybody out there: if you've got an upper flat, do not put laminate flooring in the main rooms, because I tell you what, you'll drive the person downstairs crazy. Regardless of you think you've got insulation in between and all the rest of it, it just doesn't work. There's even some new builds now insist that you can't put laminate flooring in their tiles. For that very reason. So if you've got family viewers, don't let them run riot. You know, make sure you see if you run riot or you manage them well. Is there anything else we want to consider? I think from, like I say, about people being courteous in their manners, and if people are going to be late and think, do you know what I mean? If they don't turn up for the viewing in time, are they texting you or they phoning you to say, look, I'm running 5 minutes late, I'm stuck in traffic, or do you know what I mean? If people just turn up maybe 10 minutes later and you've already left, and don't take
it's a big thing, isn't it?
Timekeeping.
You know why it's a big thing? In the past, I've known that, because exactly, if they're like that with you in the beginning, how on earth are they going to be like that with the tenancy? When you try to get in touch with them, when you try to do any repairs or get into do any inspections, and we'll talk about these things as well, but it's true. It's like, do they actually have any courtesy about them? Do they let you know in advance, or do they just turn up late and not really bother? And it's like, really? It's like, there's no way. And it's not the fact that you're being discriminated towards them, you're being discriminated what they're doing and how they're acting. So effectively, dare I say, on the verge of antisocial behaviour.
Yeah. And if they don't think it's important enough to notify you that they're running late or they're going to be late and things, then what does that say about how they're going to approach paying the rent on time? Or, like you say, giving you access when you need to check things from a safety aspect, or even just do an inspection. So
this is when it comes back to my sixth sense. Listen to your sixth sense. It is really true. After carrying out thousands of viewings, thousands of interviews with tenants, we know how to spot really good tenants. If you have any doubts, keep looking until you find that perfect match.
Yeah.
If you just have that doubt, there's something that you just can't put your finger on. It's genuinely true. There's often, I tell you, there's a couple of times when I've taken people around and say, oh, I keep my house very well and all the rest of it. And I thought, there's just something just doesn't fit right with this. Like just the way they appear and the way they present themselves. And I thought, there's something, you know, what you're saying and what you're coming across are two different things.
Don't match,
but I still try to go against my gut, my sixth sense, and I say to myself, no, they'll be fine. You know, they're talking a good game. And then just to confirm it, just like I'm in the area, I'll give them a quick call. I'm in the area. any chance I could pop in and see you in your existing house because I need to speak to you about something. This is really just another reference point. We're going to talk about in this a minute about referencing, but this is another way I would use to actually just reference somebody, just to know, to tick that box before I finally say yes, to know. Now, you have to be extremely vigilant now, don't you? Especially with the moratorium on evictions.
Yeah.
Because then if you've got somebody in, you've got no chance. You've unless they're tearing shreds out of your house and destroying it, that's the only way you're going to be able to serve eviction notice now, according to the Scottish Government, which in my opinion is absolute lunacy. But we are where we are right now with rent freezes and all the rest of it. So if in doubt, keep looking until you get that perfect match, but you can doorstep someone and say, you know, I just want to have a wee chat with you and then see how they live. Now, that one in particular I talked about, I came round to the house and there was about 3 cars in the driveway. They were all in different bits and all in different degradations, you know, like a newer one, an older one and a really old one, all just rusting away in the driveway. And I thought to myself, and you're telling me you're going to look after the house?
Yeah.
It's like, no chance. Anyway, this is when we talk about referencing there. So, you know, let's get on to referencing. You know, do people actually skimp on referencing? And why shouldn't we skimp on referencing? Because often it is an easy one. People just think to themselves, oh, you talk a good game and you sound all right. Let's just put you in. I mean, what's the pitfall of that?
I've seen that happen so many times. Don't skimp on your referencing. I think
once you found... The friends is a classic example as well. Oh, it's my best pal, and I'm like, oh my god!
Or even family, friends and family are sometimes
family. Because then they feel obliged. The amount of times I've actually had people, I've had a person along the road, right, in East Neuk, and I'm not going to say who they are, obviously, but they've got their sister in their property, and they've never paid a penny in rent since they moved in. And they've now got a lawyer onto them, and it's their sister. And they've no paid a penny. And it's like, oh my God, and I went round the house and they've destroyed it.
Yeah, I've had that. That's you'd be amazed. Well, you wouldn't, Jim, but I mean, the public in general, people would be amazed at the amount of landlords that come forward and say, can you help me? I'm in a situation, the tenants do it. And I'm like, right, okay. And it turns out the tenant's like their brother or their cousin, or and it's like, so how have you got to this stage?
Well, their best friend was known for years, and they really wanted to help them out because they're on hard times. It's like they're on hard times for a reason because of the way they act. You know, this is what you've got to think about as well. They are where they are because of who they are right now at this point in time. Do you really need to take that on? You're not a social worker, when it comes to it. Myself included, I'm always prone to think, oh, I could help them out and all the rest of it. And it backfires on me. But it's the risk I can take in that context. But for a landlord that's maybe got 2 properties, which is generally the majority of landlords in the UK, they can't afford to take a risk like that. So you've got to be very, very vigilant, especially on the referencing point. Carry on, Richard.
It's true what you say, Jim. In that situation, they take people on merit and think, all right, that's fine, I'll put you in, I trust you. But once you've found a tenant and you're happy with them, don't ignore the referencing process. No matter how great you feel about someone, it's not the same as actually knowing that they can afford the property. And if they are financially stable, like you say, if they're in a situation, they're there for a reason. And there's a lot of different ways that you could, obviously there's like there is checklists for referencing that we take, and that identifies the best tenants at the initial stages. Even once you've done that initial meeting and think they're brilliant, you still need to do this. Landlord references are really valuable, and if you could follow up with them on the phone, an okay reference rather than a glowing one, as a glowing reference might always hide maybe some. Do you know what I mean? If you got an absolute glowing reference from a landlord, are you just trying to pass them on to me?
I've had it in the past. It's like they want to leave, and I'm scratching my head thinking there's something wrong here. Eh? It's like, why are you giving them a fantastic reference if you would love to keep them as a tenant?
Be careful.
And they're telling me they really like the house, but they're actually leaving. And I'm like, there's something that doesn't fit right here. And it's literally the landlord's actually possibly, no, let's be honest, they have been making it up in the past in order to get rid of the tenant, to pass that problem on to you. So just be wary about that. You can get a reference in writing though. Get a reference in writing, see if you can get it in writing, see if you can send them an email, and just get a reference back for them. Because if they do that and they know there's something untoward, it is a legally binding reference. Therefore, you have repercussions or reprivation or whatever it is against against the landlord for giving that reference if anything seriously goes wrong.
Yeah. Just to clarify on that one though, because people might be listening and thinking, so if I have a glowing reference, you're not going to give me a property.
No.
That's not what we're saying. It's just be wary, because there is instances where an overly glowing reference is sometimes a wee bit of a red flag. We're not looking for the Tenant of the Year award. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you've got a reasonably good reference, then that's quite adequate enough. Sometimes they're a wee bit too good, and you need to question sometimes that. But yeah, if you come with a glowing reference, that is still good.
Would you advise? You know, there's some bodies out there that do tenant referencing already. They do it all for you, and the tenant actually has this sort of passport, a tenant's passport, to say that they can, you know, I've been referenced by so and so already, this big body, and I'm a great tenant according to them, and then they appear with that. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've had it in the past, and I mean, the majority of times it's okay. It's something I would be wary of as well. But because then, I mean, who governs these people? These agencies, these companies that do that? We use our own independent reference company, and I trust them, and I trust the feedback we get for them.
Well, there's an incentive to get them to have a glowing reference if you've got that agency, because therefore they're paying you for it. So effectively, there's a conflict there because they're actually paying you for the glowing reference.
Yeah.
Who would pay you for a bad reference to have a passport, a tenant's passport to move through? So you're probably better to follow the route of the normal tenant reference.
Your own,
we do.
You have your own agency that you work with.
So there's other things over and above. There's the normal credit check. There's the normal, to see if there's any CCJs, which is county court judgments, or decrees in Scotland, where people have actually got outstanding debt for various reasons, and if they've not told you beforehand. So if you're a tenant out there and you do have a CCJ, which is a county court judgment for debt, or you've got a decree, which is in Scotland, the same thing for debt outstanding, then be upfront with that in the beginning, because if that's seen on a credit reference after you turn around and say you've got no issues and you've got nothing in the past, you'll be immediately rejected for that reason, because then it's just like a bank. You're basically telling a lie. There's times where you can be forgotten. I mean, I've had a wee argument with Sky TV years ago, and maybe they've given me a bad reference for 25 quid. But the reality is, it's like it was justified.
Yeah, as you say about CCJs.
Get it up, your Sky TV.
A lot of people don't realise sometimes if they've got, if it is just a small amount or something, or they've moved house. Some people don't realise. So that's something. I mean, employers' references is obviously an important one, and or accounts if somebody's self-employed. Bank statements
this is
are
where
really
it comes
good
back to what you said about the back date and all the rest of it. But this is what you came back to say in the previous one, which you hinted on, the fact that an employer's reference is okay, but then you've got to check how long they've been at that employer and how long they're going to be in that, or in their trial period, and where were they before that? Are they in consistent employment all the time, or is it just the fact that they picked it up because anybody's got a pulse can get this job? And I've got to be hanged about this and say it's usually process and farm workers. It's a classic example, and I'm always asking things like that as well, because I'm a landlord, and you come to me sometimes and say I've got a certain tenant, and you'll still discuss it with me because it's my property at the end of the day, and that's what we do. We still discuss it with the landlord and the circumstance of the tenant, and I will say things like, how long they've been in that job, what job were they in before, and I know you've done it already, but I always just double check anyway, just to make sure. And often you're absolutely right. Some people have actually, in the past, they've only just got that job, and immediately they get the job. They go, "I'm going to run out and get a new house," and it's like
they've only been there a month or 2 months.
Sorry, where were you before that? Oh, I'm living with my parents now. Okay, right. Okay. Do you know the implications about having a new house and how much it's going to cost? Oh, no, really? I just thought I could get a new house because I've got a job. And I'm like, okay, so your rent's going to be 450 quid a month. Your electricity is going to be probably about £200 a month. Your food bills are going to be probably about 300 to 400 a month, maybe even 500 a month. And then you've got your council tax, which is probably another £100 a month. And I said, you're not going to have much left to actually survive on. Would you not be better just stay with your parents and save the money and buy your own house? And genuinely, I've actually said that to some people. It's
and
like
some people still say, "No, I'll be fine."
Oh, I'll be fine, and I'm like, "How are you going to be fine?" Because at this point in time, you're a negative £100. How are you going to be fine? You're a negative £100. You're £100 over your budget, what you can afford, what you're earning right now. How is that possible? I can still afford it. How are you going to afford that? So, equally we can get the employer's reference, but these are good questions to ask. And again, I go back to saying, if you're a landlord out there, you shouldn't feel discouraged from asking these questions, because they're legitimate questions in the process of assessing whether somebody's competent enough to have a house, especially yours. Because you ain't getting them out that easy. You've got to have 3 months in arrears and rent, haven't you, in order to even enact what is now, I think, a discretionary ground in the Housing Act, where somebody can you can apply to the tribunal and serve eviction. And then by that time it's all gone. You're 6 months down the road. You've lost another 6 months rent. So you're 9 months rent. And hence the reason why you must be very, very vigilant in the beginning.
Yeah.
Bank statements.
And like I say, don't think, oh, I can't ask all those questions. Yeah, of course you can. And bank statements, yeah, Jim, you're right. Bank statements are a really good one. They not only just confirm, obviously, what their salary is and that they've actually got that coming into their bank account, but it also reveals their spending habits and how they manage their finances, and gauge whether renting your property will be comfortable for them as a tenant, or it will push them past their limit of their financial position. Like you say, is obviously breaking it all down. And if you open their bank statement or get their bank statement and it's fully like spending on clothes and just
what do you say to a tenant that says, I'm not giving you my bank statement?
Well, if you're not going to
be getting the house,
if you're not going to be upfront and transparent with me about your financial situation, then I'm not going to put you in one of my biggest financial assets. So I mean, that's about the bottom line there. And but
quite right. And they become the credit checks as well, don't they?
Yeah, credit checks are so important, but they do bring up the odd surprise. But that's why they're there. And like you say, Jim, CCJs are probably the ones, or IVAs and things pop up. People might not be aware of them, but if you are, be transparent about them. Be upfront and say, look, I do have this. This is why, and provide a lot of information. Just because you've got a CCJ doesn't necessarily mean you won't get a property. It depends on the circumstances surrounding it and how willing you are to discuss it.
So before we leave the subject, the best advice I can give someone is if they've got if the person that's applying for the property has a friend, or they have their mother or their father or their brother or their sister, you know what I'm going to say? If they've got any of these people, ask them to be a guarantor, even though they pass the credit check. If you're unsure, even though they pass the credit check and pass everything else, ask them if one of them will be a guarantor for them. And if you get 9 times out of 10, most say yes, but at that odd occasion when you think you're just about to take somewhere, and then their mother even turns around or their father turns around and goes, there's no way I'm being a guarantor for him or her.
That's a red flag.
Oh my God, why is that? And then they go, because he put me in debt, or she put me in debt all these years ago. And it's like, thank God I asked that question. It dodged the bullet there, eh? It's like, genuinely ask a friend or a mother or a father or a relative or a sibling or anything like that to be a guarantor for them, and see if they can get anybody. Because 99 times out of 100 they will, and it'll be fine. But one time out of 100 now and again, just when you're unsure about something, you've got that sixth sense about it, that you end up getting this question, them saying, I can't get anybody, not even my mother and my father. And then that's got to raise a red flag, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that if nobody's going to vouch for them, then I would definitely take that as a big red flag.
Yeah, but, CCGs are often small amounts related to phone bills, shopping counts, as I said, Sky, but they can give you an idea of someone's financial awareness. That's a really good one, isn't it? Because a classic is they take the Sky out, they take the broadband out, they take the telephone out, they take everything else out, and then they just let it lapse, and then it eventually gets cut off, and that's why it ends up like this. And then you've got to then think about yourself as like, how will they approach how they pay their rent? How will they approach even how they report repairs, if that's the case? If they're not prepared to discuss anything or sort anything out, and they've got already, then what do you think they're going to do when it comes to reporting repairs, which is a very important thing. Often you'll get these exact same people then castigating on social media saying they've never repaired this or they've never repaired that, and you're like, well, you've never reported it, or every time we've tried to get access to sort it, you've refused, or you've just no turned up when you're meant to.
the main thing as well with not reporting repairs is some things, if left, could end up costing a fortune to repair,
Yeah.
and they could have been fixed in the early stages for a
Especially
nominal
water
amount.
ingress.
Yeah.
Water
Yeah.
ingress is a big one. So do your research when choosing a letting agent, thorough referencing for every tenant is time and money well spent. So
Yeah.
definitely that's it. We're going to come to the next one here. Prepare a detailed inventory. Why?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Why is that so important? Really? You know, you moved into the property, you got it, and we took photographs of the property. And when you move out of the property, well, you know, if you've damaged something compared to my photograph, well, I'll just take off your deposit.
No, you can't do that. You can't just do that. And the most common thing I hear from people is that there's no furniture in the property. The property is unfurnished, which generally properties are. But you need to think about your fixtures and your fittings. And if they get damaged and can be really expensive, you're not going to be able to make a claim through the deposit scheme where all your deposits should be banked.
Yeah.
A detailed signed inventory by the landlord and the tenant is not only your protection in the event of a dispute, it also shows respect to the tenant by giving them an accurate record of the tenant's the property's condition when they move in. And it safeguards everybody, not just you, the tenant as well, keeps everybody on the same page. You could read about creating watertight inventories and things in some of your previous blogs. We've done it a few times. But as an absolute minimum, you should be doing inventories to a basic standard. Now, there's certain things that obviously constitute what a basic inventory is. Now, preparing an inventory for a sign-in or a check-in, or put a condition in the tenancy agreement. Now, that's English law. The PRT already has it in it for Scotland anyway, about inventories and the deposit scheme.
What's the PRT?
Private residential tenancy, sorry.
Okay.
That is the template set
agreement
out.
in Scotland. Yep.
Yeah, that's set out by the Scottish Government now as the template for the tenancy agreement in Scotland. Now, that's from December 2017. So tenants have 7 days to obviously review their inventory, question anything that they think is not an accurate reflection of what the property was given across as, and they could then sign it after the 7 days and hand it back and keep it on file, so they deem that that's an acceptable representation of the property. That is so important when you come to the end of a tenancy.
So what would that inventory be?
I think it needs to include everything in the property from like your kitchen fittings, your bathroom fittings, the decor condition. Is it newly painted? Is it freshly painted? Do you mean these kind of terminologies? Is the carpet as new, or is it? I mean, is it in a fair condition? Things like your power points and your power sockets, are they? Do you mean are they on pictures of them obviously as well? But a description of how they are in terms of their condition. They're not cracked. They're not got paint.
Tell you a good one about that is, Richard, and you mentioned about power sockets. In the past, we'd been castigated saying that power socket was broken when I moved in, and the tenants actually tried to do something legally about it in terms of my tenancies. And the next minute, it's like we just haul out the inventory agreement, and it's like, well, it wasn't like that when you moved in.
And they signed an agreement to it, yeah.
It's like you're nailed to the wall, pal, lying.
Yeah. and although I talk about using the right terminology and descriptions for things, always have supporting photographs or videos. I think photographs are suffice in an inventory because they're all in the one document. But it gives absolute clarity if you've got a good description of how something is and a photo of how it was, and the tenant signed an agreement to that. Now, one thing I would say, obviously, doing your own inventories is perfectly fine. You can do that. Safe deposits accept them as long as they're in a safe deposit. Scotland is who we use. There's other deposit schemes, but you need to do it in a certain format. I will say that is quite time consuming. You could always use a third party, like an inventory clerk and things, to do that. We use an inventory clerk to do that. It's always good to have a third party's opinion as well, rather than it just be our take on how the property was to them as well. So if you're self-managing, then use an inventory clerk still. And if you're using an agency, I would imagine that they have one that does it for them, like yourselves.
It probably would carry weight if it came to a dispute, wouldn't it?
Sorry?
It probably would carry a lot more weight if it came to a dispute.
If you've got a third party who's involved doing the inventory, who's not you, obviously, then when you go to do a claim through the deposit scheme, they will look on that a wee bit more favourably because it's not just your opinion against theirs or
Now,
your word.
is it very rare that you end up having to claim for any damage to a property, or is it quite common?
In the grand scheme of things, it's not something that is vastly common. Sometimes it's just wee niggly things that obviously the tenant gets a chance to come back and maybe rectify. But to safeguard your selling, something might be very costly, especially if you've got a brand new refurb property. You want a record of what that was like.
Well, I'm always told the story from the guys in Glasgow, the solicitors. They're fantastic. They worked on the tenant side years and years ago. They now work for the landlord side as well. And they told me the story of, the story about the new build. The person moved into the new build, and the landlord didn't bother doing that, didn't bother taking an inventory or anything. And just when he walked back in, the walls were like pink, every single walls.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you're not getting the deposit back. They immediately, the solicitor wrote to him and said, you want the deposit back because you tell me what. He says, but it wasn't like that when they moved in. It was Magnolia. He says, well, prove it. And he couldn't prove it at all. So therefore, he just had to give them the deposit back, and then had to spend thousands repainting the house from top to bottom, and all the skippings and facings, because it was all done really poorly and badly in the beginning. So it's really important. It does carry a lot of weight in any dispute. And also, if you have to go even further and you have to then take it to the court to actually get, because it might go beyond the damage of the cost of the deposit, won't it? But you don't actually you'll get to keep the deposit. But then if it's God forbid, if it's another couple of £1,000 because they've done that, and especially if they're working and they've got a really good job, because that does happen, you've got recourse against them in the small claims court, and you're able to claim that and get a decree against them, and the decree lasts 20 years, and you could just go and arrest their wages if they don't pay it.
Can I just, and on that, can we just look back to the referencing process? If you don't do the referencing process correctly and you don't have all their details and their employment details, their national insurance number, you'll find it very difficult to be able to do that.
Yeah, you'll have to end up employing tracing agents and everything like that, but it's even more difficult, and it'll cost you even more money to try and get that. And a lot of people just give up because it's like, oh God, is it really worth it? Remember, it's a landlord's responsibility to prove fault on the part of the tenants. Without clear before and after evidence, you're likely to lose any dispute. So any inventory is a must-have for every single tenancy. Inspect your property regularly. Should we be doing this? I've always, for me personally, in the beginning, I always used to be quite upfront with my tenants, and I say in the very beginning, 30 years ago, I used to say, look, I've not got enough hours in the day, to be honest. I can't just come and inspect properties all the time. Although I was always it was really close proximity. It was, most of my properties were right across the road from it, in the same street even, and it was easy for me just to pop across and sort something out, or check somebody out, or make sure they're okay, and looking after them, or sort something at the drop of a hat. But when you get bigger, you can't afford the time to do that. It's not as flexible as that. So therefore, is it important to inspect regularly?
It is really important to inspect regularly. And I mean, I know it's been difficult the last couple of years with access and COVID and all the rest of it, but we're back into a situation where inspections can take place as they should be. Tenancy agreements, the private residential tenancy in Scotland, or if it's the shorter tenancy, if it's older tenancies, they all have in that, it's all outlined that access for inspections, well, the tenancy agreements that we use anyway, obviously, I know we use certain templates, that so make sure it's in there that you have got the written consent from the tenant when they sign the agreement that they will allow access for mid-tenancy inspections. I think mid-tenancy inspections are important. The initial inspection with a tenant and have them present is always a good way to discuss initial teething issues and any uncertainties with things regarding the property, and to build that relationship with your tenant as well.
Well, some letting agents should really be doing that within the first month, but ideally, you should really just do that initial inspection when you walk around the property, when you introduce the tenant to it.
Yeah, that's the best time to do it.
There is a big thing about just signing a tenancy agreement, throwing the keys to the tenancy, and there you go. And it's like, no, I'll probably just take you around the beginning and make sure you know what everything is, where everything is, the stopcock, the heating, how that works, and everything like that.
Yeah, we do that on the day you move in. We're there. We hand over the keys. We go through the inventory. We show them the general workings of the property, and like you say, whether that be this is how you do the pressure on the boiler or how you work the actual heating system. Do you know when the bins go out, how this works, and have that, and you're doing that initial walk around an inspection with them at that point. And then obviously subsequently you have your periodic inspections following that. Future inspections should be at least every 6 months. If your tenants are out, and an inspection generally only takes around about 15 to 30 minutes. I mean, it's no big invasive inspection. You could do an inspection fairly quickly as long as you see every room, check all the smoke alarms, have a conversation with the tenant, check the garden. Do you know all these main things? Look at the gutters, look at the roof and the gutters as you're outside. Do you mean?
Oh, wait a minute. Can I just draw you back there?
Yeah.
Why would you be checking gutters?
Just to make sure they're not overgrown.
Okay. I just thought, because a lot of times people don't realise that's what we're doing. We're doing more prevention rather than cure, aren't we?
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, again, if you've got a really vigilant tenant and things, they will contact you and say, "Look, there's stuff growing in my gutters. They're needing cleared." But it's a good thing to keep an eye on when you're in inspections. If you're out in the garden, checking that the garden's maintained, have a look around your gutters and the roof, and look for any slip tiles. And just, I mean, a visual inspection takes a matter of minutes, and it could really help in the long run. Inside, I think checking, like you say, Jim, water ingress and things is a really big one, and it should be reported. But check for water stains, mildew, lime scale, broken hinges and handles on doors. Do you mean? I mean, open doors and cupboards and things to make sure everything's working correctly. And like I said again about testing smoke alarms, making sure they're in place. Make sure your carbon monoxide detector's in place. And if there's any appliances and things, look at them. Look at the washing machine and see that it's been kept properly. I know obviously washing machines are prone to be covered in mold and mildew if they're not cleaned and maintained properly. So look at that if you've got a furnished property, because this could have a detrimental effect to the appliances functioning, and then might cost you having to buy a new one.
Yeah, good.
There's a lot of things to look out for in the inspection.
So on this post is the link to the blog we've discussed today. If you'd like to know more about that as well, about carrying out midterm inspections, take a look at the rental checkup blogs in there. So it's not in that. So you click on the link, and then in that link itself, in the article we've just discussed now, we just had written out for our teams put together first, and we've given our own unique experiences of this. There's also a rental checkups blog as well. There's also, dare I say, the creating watertight inventories blog as well. And then there's also the one on actually whether they have children or pets blog as well.
Parents and Paws, that one's called.
Yeah, Parents and Paws. So that's another one to look out for as well, and tune into that. There's lots and lots of advice. Thanks very much for coming on the show, Richard. I really appreciate that. The one big thing you could tell people out of this, they should concentrate on, what would it be?
Don't just take people on their merit. Do your proper checks and things, and don't be scared to actually ask the questions and think that you're not allowed to. You definitely are. And trust your gut instinct. If it's the initial reference and process and something's not right, 9 times out of 10, your gut's probably the one to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that as well.
I think as well, if anything that we've discussed today and you think, God, that's quite comprehensive compared to what I do and things, feel free to speak to us and get any tips and advice and the best way to do things. You could always message me, email me.
I mean, finding the very best tenants who are perfect fit with your rental property is a special sauce, and avoiding problem tenancies and creating stable lettings as well. That's most important as well.
Yeah,
it is really your speciality, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's it. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate that. Listen, guys, tune in Monday, 12:30. We will be doing the Wealth Creation Show, Richard and I. We'll be talking about 7 different types of income streams. Very big thing now. Obviously, properties maybe not flavour of the month now. It seems to be getting a bottom in the news and stuff like that. So you need to diversify a bit, and you need to look at other income streams in terms of that. And I know it's a bit cliche. Oh, multiple income streams. It's like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual real life situations where you can actually just create another income stream. So, because I always find that one goes up, one comes down. And every dog has their day, so one sets off against the other, and it's just to keep you in a stable wealth environment. So that's why we do the Wealth Creation Show, to talk about that as well. So tune into that at 12:30 on Monday live. Richard and I will be talking about the 7 different types of income streams. And until next week, thanks very much for coming on, Richard, and it's